So we are covering the firing of Tucker Carlson from Fox News. And here is a headline from a few years ago. Surprise, Tucker Carlson draws the most Democratic viewers in key demo, even topping Rachel Maddow. So not only was Tucker Carlson the top-rated cable news host, he was even the most popular cable news host among Democrats. And here's Jimmy Dore pointing out, maybe this was a factor in why Tucker Carlson was popular among Democrats. Jimmy says, no one else in all corporate news ever brings on anti-war voices. The one that did just got axed. It doesn't matter that he's the most watched show in all of news, much like when MSNBC fired Phil Donahue for his anti-Iraq war coverage when he had the #1 show on the network, #WarMachine. And it's true, Tucker Carlson would bring on voices that you could not hear anywhere else on cable news. For example, Jimmy Dore.
We're the ones provoking this war, just like we provoked the war in Ukraine. We are now provoking a war with China. And who benefits? I'll tell you right now. Your enemy is not China. Your enemy is not Russia. Your enemy is the military-industrial complex, which has been fleecing this country to the tunes of hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars. How many times are we going to have a defense secretary say, "Hey, we can't account for $2 trillion in the Pentagon again"? Which has happened twice now in my lifetime. So again, people are being the war machine cannot be stopped. Who's running this country? The war machine. It certainly isn't Joe Biden making these decisions. I would like to know who is making the decisions. And I just want to remind everybody, the United States is the world's terrorist. We just set the Middle East on fire in the last 20 years. And now we're doing a proxy war in Ukraine, which we provoked, NATO provoked, and it was just admitted that we provoked it by the former prime minister of Germany. And now we're trying to saber rattle with China, and they're predicting a war. Again, China's not going to invade us. China's not our enemy. We might have an economic war. That's what these are. These are economic wars. These are wars for, in Ukraine, it's about liquefied natural gas and making sure Germany and Russia never come together because we fear Russia's natural resources and manpower, and we fear them getting together with Germany with their technology and their capital. And so that's why we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That's why we're doing the Ukraine war. This is all about hegemony, imperialism, and economics. And if there's a Marine somewhere, it's there because they're about to steal some natural resources from another country. As everybody's screaming about what a bad guy Putin is for invading Ukraine, the United States is currently occupying a third of Syria. And which third is that? It's the third that has the oil. And how do I know we're there to steal their oil? Because the president of the United States said so.
And we're not even benefiting economically. Of course, that's the rub. Jimmy Dore, appreciate it. Thank you.
So yeah,
wow, first of all, that was pretty good, and
I think you're about to get fired from Fox News.
As I'm watching that, honestly, I've forgotten all the things that I had said. It is mind blowing that I was able to say that on the #1 corporate sponsored news show in the country.
You got him fired from Fox.
The fact that, believe me, that's
when
amazing.
Rupert was watching his network, he was probably not happy to see Jimmy come on the air in the APM hour.
Wow, that was really something.
It is,
and people get upset that I do that. What mentals?
Yeah.
It is wild. The only real consequences are if you came out against a war in a time of war. That's the only.
As always.
Yeah. It was only a matter of time. This had to happen eventually. He was the most popular host, but there was no way that the corporate state would have allowed him to continue like this.
No.
He was saying too much. He was challenging not just current wars, but also talking about how the government won't release the files on JFK. He was going all these places that no one else dared to go. Back during Russiagate, he had on Max Blumenthal very early on to call it out. This is a great appearance.
Max Blumenthal joins us in studio. I love that exchange because it's similar to so many I've had on this show, where if you call into question a fact being asserted, you're immediately accused of being a handmaiden to Vladimir Putin. So let me just ask the broadest possible question. You're not a Trump voter or supporter. You're a lifelong man on the left, I think it's fair to say, pretty well-known one. And yet you don't think that this Russia story is helpful to the left or makes sense. Why?
Yeah, we have to talk about the issue of efficacy also, in addition to the fact that I haven't seen any concrete evidence and Rachel Maddow's dots may never connect. And so, as someone on the left who's actually gone out and protested Trump, I didn't expect this hysteria to completely take over, but now I see what the point is of it. I see Trump as the apotheosis of a failed political establishment, both from the Democrats and the Republicans, pushing corporate trade, pushing permanent war. And I thought the Democrats should have responded with a big narrative against permanent war and for economic equality. Instead, they're pushing Russia's scandal-mongering nonstop. It's subsumed all of the progressive grassroots movements I believed in, and it's basically buried the left in a militaristic narrative that ambitious figures like Jamie Raskin are advancing. Mark my words, Tucker, when Trump is gone, this narrative, this Russia hysteria, will be repurposed by the political establishment to attack the left and anyone on the left. Bernie Sanders-like politician who steps out of line on the issues of permanent war.
Which is exactly what happened.
Oh, my God.
They did use it against Bernie himself. And right now, we just saw 4 members of a black leftist Socialist Party getting indicted. So, and you couldn't say that anywhere else but on Tucker Carlson's show.
Yeah, this is the ultimate irony. The guy of course, the guy that everybody in the establishment news corps said was the worst thing ever was because he was outdoing them.
Yep. Back when Trump's administration launched a coup in Venezuela, here's Anya Pompeo of the Gray Zone calling it out.
So what do you make of the news coverage of this?
Your viewers won't be shocked to hear this, Tucker, but the news media, the fake news media, are lying about the situation in Venezuela. Let me put it for you this way. Imagine if Hillary Clinton had refused to admit defeat after losing to President Trump in 2016 and banded together a group of 24 U.S. soldiers and attempted to take the White House by force. I don't think she'd be walking freely on the streets the way Juan Guaido is walking right now in Caracas, and I certainly think the news media would be calling it rightfully a coup. And let me just tell you, when it comes to what's happening on the ground there, I can tell you, I was there for a month earlier this year. The opposition has no popular support. Juan Guaido proved today once again that he will only ride in to power on the back of a U.S. tank. And what's more, we hear about a humanitarian crisis there, Tucker, but what we never hear is that is the intended result of U.S. sanctions which have targeted Venezuela since 2015. Sanctions which, according to a report that was released just last week by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, has led to the deaths of 40,000 Venezuelans and will lead to the deaths of thousands more if these sanctions aren't overturned. President Trump, if he truly cared about the American or the Venezuelan people and the American people for that matter, he would end this disastrous policy. He would end the sanctions, and he would look into John Bolton's eyes, into Elliott Abrams' eyes, and Mike Pompeo's eyes and say, "You are fired. You are leading me down a disastrous path, another war for oil," something the president said.
You are passionate.
He was celebrated by the American people when he said Iraq was a mistake, and now he's willing to do it again.
But it is a bipartisan thing. I mean, Biden came out today and said he agrees.
Absolutely, it is a bipartisan issue.
So, it's interesting. It would be interesting to know why that is. I believe in an open debate.
Was this 2016?
I'm sure I agree with everything you said, but I'm glad that you could say it here.
2017.
And you were just there, and I don't think you'd be allowed at any other show to say that.
No, I certainly don't.
You would never out of time.
So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity because President Trump promised to drain the swamp, and he flooded his national security team with that exact swamp.
Well, I agree with that, actually. Anya, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
So he's been persuaded over time.
Yeah, that was early 2019 when the coup was launched.
So he's actually genuinely hearing people out, and you could see his entire transformation from that.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
So he's supposed to be like a Trump sycophant, but here he is bringing on a leftist journalist calling out Trump's coup attempt in Venezuela, where meanwhile MSNBC did not air one critical segment about the coup attempt because they're on board with that, because Democrats like Joe Biden.
Dude, I had no idea. And I remember that vividly when Trump gave the State of the Union. He goes, Juan Guaido, the terrific real leader of Venezuela. And I thought it was Guido. The name stuck in my head. Then we're on here. Did you show where it was Aaron sitting in, where Juan Guaido's getting beat up in a restaurant?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, why does that guy live in Venezuela if he tried to overthrow the... That's nice of them.
They never arrested him. They never arrested him.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Never.
And America don't care about the rightful heir to Venezuela's being beaten up in a chicken place?
I think what is the most centered story in media, the cover-up of the OPCW investigation, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which investigated this alleged chemical attack in Douma, Syria. The Trump administration bombed Syria by claiming that Syria was guilty of a chemical attack. The OPCW actually found no evidence of a chemical attack and plenty of evidence that this was actually staged by sectarian rebels, but then covered up their own investigation. And the only person on cable news willing to cover it was Tucker Carlson. And even across leftist media, very few people would cover it. I mean, Jimmy Dore covers it. We cover it at the Gray Zone. Only a few others, but otherwise totally censored. But Tucker Carlson did, and he gave it a really big airing multiple times. This is an example.
In April of 2018, there was one of those rare moments of total bipartisan consensus that ought to make you very nervous. Everybody, Democrats and Republicans, political operatives, the investigative journalists you see on TV, they were all in total agreement on one point. The United States needed to bomb Syria immediately. We needed to hate Syria and its leader, President Bashar al-Assad. Now, they never quite explained why he was so bad. But in April of 2018, they gave us a hint. They told us Assad had targeted his own people with chemical weapons, including chlorine. And for that, we were assured, the United States, along with a coalition of the willing, needed to punish Syria. Now, we raised doubts, obvious ones, about that story at the time. For one thing, there was no evidence that a chlorine gas attack had actually happened. None. At the Pentagon, the defense secretary claimed that there were, quote, a lot of media and social media indicators that either chlorine or sarin was used. Wait a minute, we said, media and social media indicators? You're the military. Shouldn't you have actual evidence before we bomb a sovereign country? Shouldn't we at least know that they committed the crime we're killing them for? Days after the alleged poison gas attack, we asked that same question on the show. Before we go to war, are we sure all of this is real? Do we really know that Assad was behind the gas attack? It's not a defense of Assad, but it's an obvious question. How could we know that conclusively so soon after the attack happened? So you're not supposed to ask questions like that, super obvious ones like, do we know this really happened? For the crime of asking that question, pretty much every media organization in the country followed the Pentagon's orders and tried to shut us down. Jen Rubin of the Washington Post wrote this, quote, he is insane, meaning this show. Fox News is not a news organization. That is all. Noah Rothman of Commentary called this show nothing less than undiluted Russian propaganda. We're defending Assad, who, by the way, saved a huge numbers of Christians in Syria, but we're not allowed to care about that or think it's significant. Anyway, that was the media climate on April 14th, 2018, when the U.S., along with France and the U.K., bombed Syria. Now, a year later, in March of 2019, the world's chemical weapons watchdog weighed in. According to a final report from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, there were, quote, reasonable grounds to conclude that, quote, the use of a toxic chemical as a weapon took place. Now, the Pentagon claimed that that report vindicated their decision to kill people in Syria, something they would go on to do quite a bit more in the future, including just recently under this new administration. But two OPCW investigators who went to Syria, Ian Henderson and Brendan Whelan, objected to that initial report. Now, according to the Courage Foundation, an organization that represents whistleblowers, several former OPCW investigators and high-level officials, and this is fascinating, are calling its conclusions invalid. Specifically, they're alleging that the investigation was scientifically biased, that it was improper, and that it was unethical.
So no one else would touch that story. No one else. But he gave it a hearing multiple times. And I was allowed to go on and talk about it, whereas everywhere else, except for here on the Jimmy Dore Show and in the Gray Zone and a few other outlets, I was not welcome. And I got to say things like this.
The facts here are overwhelming. The original OPCW team that went to Syria did not find any evidence of a chemical weapons attack in Douma. They wrote up their findings in a report. That report was suppressed and kept from the public. They were then removed from the investigation and replaced by officials who would never set foot in Syria, who then put out a final report that excluded the key scientific findings of the original team and reached unsupported conclusions. And this is not just an allegation from two whistleblowers, it's documented in a damning series of leaks that have come out. They were given to WikiLeaks. We've gotten some too at the Gray Zone. And they show in great detail what happened here, what a cover-up this was, and anybody can see the facts for themselves.
So that's just an example of what was on the Tucker Carlson show that nobody else would cover, including many self-described leftist outlets who painted themselves, by the way, as being adversarial to Trump. But when it comes to this issue, Trump bombing Syria over a baseless chemical weapons allegation, they fell totally silent or even behind the Trump administration's allegation. And this is an example of how the Tucker Carlson show dissented from that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to be left watching cable news because people aren't really watching cable news that much. Certainly not CNN. Joe Rogan gets about 1,100,000% more viewers than they do.
My girl's parents watch cable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just saying. I don't know what's going to be left there. I mean, since Russiagate is over and Trump is gone, the MSNBC and CNN's ratings have been in the dumper, and Fox News now just fired their most popular host. So I don't know. Some people are predicting this is the end of cable news, but we'll see.
Stay tuned to Succession on HBO for how this plays out.
We get this show does better than most shows on CNN.
Absolutely.
I can't believe that Tucker did better with Rachel Maddow fans than Rachel Maddow.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing to me.
Isn't that amazing? And what's amazing is that even though this show does better numbers than most shows on CNN, CNN still makes $1 billion a year.
Because it's from the pool of cable money or something?
I don't know. I don't know how that works, but that's what I know. We're telling jokes in Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Chicago, Rosemont, San Diego, and more. Go to jimmydore.com to get a link for all those tickets. Plus, you can watch my new special, COVID Lies Are Funny.